Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 624. I'm Tom Kegley, your host. The Software Process and Measurement Cast 624 is structured a little bit differently. We begin with the conclusion of a 3-column arc on grateful leadership from Susan Parente's Not a Scrumdamentalist column. In this installment, Susan and I discuss how servant leadership, commonly practiced by agilists, can combine with grateful leadership to be even more powerful. Links in the show notes to the earlier installments on the podcast. After Susan's column, we visit the first essay in the 4-part series on why teams don't get stories done when they say they will. The essay, Our Stories Aren't Getting Done, names the 3 usual suspects that cause stories to escape sprints. Susan Parente, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Susan, your Not a Scrumdamentalist column is really one of the highlights that I love to go through. I learn a ton. I'm really glad that you're participating.
Thank you, Tom. And it's always great. You have such a great way to ask questions and engage in wonderful conversation because truly, I wish that our listeners could ask us questions. We haven't figured out a way to do that, but it would be nice to have that. So I think that's what you present to me. So instead of me just kind of reading off something, I'm answering questions that professionals like yourself in the industry have, and vice versa. So I think that's. My hope is that when somebody's listening, they're like, I'm really glad he asked that question. That's the question I was thinking. So thank you for that.
Well, I hope so. And by the way, for those of you that are listening, you just heard Susan throw down the gauntlet. If you know, or if you have an idea about how we can make this a broader dialogue, bring in the listeners, because we know you're out there. We run into you. Let's figure out how to make that happen. Susan, we have over the past couple of columns been talking about the idea of grateful leadership. Many of us have come into Agile and discovered Greenleaf, discovered that what Greenleaf wrote and some of the ideas that have gotten translated into servant leadership aren't exactly the same thing. How does grateful leadership, how can we do that and at the same time be servant leaders?
Well, that's a great question. So first of all, servant leadership, I sum it up like this. What can I do to help you be successful so we can be successful? Now, if it's a Scrum method that we're using for our project, then as a Scrum Master, the Scrum Master's role really is to be that servant leader. How can they help the team members so that the team can be successful? If you're using another agile method, there might actually be a project manager. So a lot of people don't think about that. Not all agile methods follow Scrum in that way. However, even if you're a project manager, if it's an agile team, you still want the team to be self-organized. You still want the team to figure out how the work's going to get done. So you definitely want to have that servant leadership style and how you lead the team. And some people would say laissez-faire, but I don't like laissez-faire because it basically just says, well, you guys do whatever you want. But I don't know, maybe from my command and control directive type of background years supporting federal government DoD, it just doesn't quite feel right to just say, do whatever you want. I think the leader needs to be more engaged. And so servant leadership has that leader engaging, but in a servant way. What can I do to help you? Well, grateful leadership is another method that not only the leader of the team, or if the team doesn't have a per se leader, it's just a self-organized team and it doesn't have a PM or anything like that. Grateful leadership is something that everyone can use. And what is great about it, and it's funny to say great, is that it focuses on acknowledging people. And I think that intrinsically we're all motivated by acknowledgement, which is kind of what we were talking about last time we met up for our podcast. And so one of the things I wanted to cover today, if I can, is there's something called the 5 C's of acknowledgement. If I can engage with that, it's kind of interesting because it puts you in a space so that you're not just saying thank you. Thank you is great, but that's not really what we're talking about when it comes to grateful leadership.
Well, bring on those 5 C's then.
Okay, so the 5 C's of acknowledgement. First, we have consciousness. So consciousness is basically being aware that you are grateful, like being aware of that gratitude. So if you're working on a project with somebody and let's say you got stuck working on a task and somebody in your team was able to help you out. This is what we do in a self-organized team. Somebody gets stuck, you go to the daily Scrum meeting and you say, hey, I'm really stuck on this. And somebody says, hey, get with me after the meeting. I can help you out with that. Great. So you're able to work through the task. And so first is that awareness that you're grateful to that person. Wow, they saved me. They bailed me out. We were able to get it done. Okay. And so without being conscious, you really can't express acknowledgement to anybody, right? You got to be conscious that there's something that happened, something great that happened. And then the second part is choice. So, there's a lot of times where we're grateful for things and we don't say it. And I'm sure my husband can attest to it, and my family members and my friends can attest to it, where you don't stop and say, gosh, thank you for that. Actually make the choice to take the thing out of your head that you're aware that you have gratitude for, and actually acknowledge the person. So there's always that choice. And with that choice also comes the next C. So these are the 5 C's of acknowledgement, which is courage. So it's really about having the courage to do that, which sounds a little bit silly, but as we talked before, that an acknowledgement needs to be actually heartfelt. And that takes a little bit of courage because you're sort of putting yourself out there. You're putting your heart out there a little bit, which I know is kind of an odd thing in our, I'm in very much technology world and IT background and engineering background. And so it's a little odd for me to even talk about it, but you really want it to come from the heart. That's part of what makes it genuine. Somebody once told me that when you speak from your heart, that's where the genuineness comes from. And there's something about, I think it's in one of the meditation type of practices that I do, but it talks about your mouth, your voice being the voice of your heart. And I think a lot of times my mouth is the voice of my brain, which is not the same. Mm-hmm. It's like saying what you think is very different than expressing gratitude. It's more like saying how you feel rather than saying what you think. So for those of you out there where your mouth seems to be the voice of your brain, consider what it might look like to be the voice of your heart. And that doesn't mean that all you're saying is, love and peace. It can actually be something that comes from your mind, a thought that comes from your mind that's expressed in a heartfelt, genuine way. And that's what takes some courage to do. And then we have communication, figuring out how to reach out to somebody to express gratitude and appreciation. So, if you're not really comfortable saying it, you might send them an email or, write them a handwritten letter. That would be odd. I was actually just on a webinar with a colleague of mine, senior person in risk management. It was a risk management webinar, and he was talking about, you can get out a pen and paper and write a letter to somebody thanking them for something. And it wasn't even about gratitude, but he was just talking about, working with other people. And you'd be amazed because people don't seem to use mail anymore. It's like, oh, you mean email? No, I mean actually like get a piece of paper, write it down. And it's funny, since I went to his webinar, I've been meaning to send him a card just saying thank you for the webinar, just as like I heard you, I got it, because it would be weird to send them an email saying I think it's great that you suggested people write. So I'm going to send them a card, and so at very little I'll get a smile. I'm sure I'll get a appreciation there, but that's that way of communicating. You could do that. You could Skype. You and I Skype often. There's different methods of communicating. So choosing that communication method. And then lastly, of the 5 C's, so we've gone through consciousness, choice, courage, communication, and the final one is commitment. And the commitment is about once you see the benefits of being grateful and acknowledging your appreciation for people, what you'll see is an opportunity to commit yourself to being a grateful leader and acknowledging people, doing that in a heartfelt way. And when you do that, I think at that point, it's about habit forming. So that commitment is really, you might want to make a conscious effort. Like I know when I learned about grateful leadership, I put a reminder in my calendar every day to express gratitude to somebody, and just doing that once a day get you in that habit. And that is part of the commitment aspect of it.
So Susan, how can this go wrong?
Wow. I think it goes wrong if it's not heartfelt, if it's not genuine. When the used car salesman thing, when that happens, like it's all very clear. When somebody is thanking you in order to, if I'm being grateful to somebody or acknowledging them in order to, they'll know it. It doesn't even matter if I say it. We get that feeling. We know when it's genuine. We know when it's not. And it's like the car salesman. You're just like, ugh, it was so slimy. I had to wash my hands after talking to him. And I didn't even touch him. It just, that conversation was slimy. And we all know it. We know when somebody is buttering us up or saying the right thing so they can get something from us. So that's how it goes wrong. I mean, I've never heard of it going wrong when somebody's being genuine. I mean, how could that be wrong to get a genuine acknowledgement and gratitude from somebody?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty critical key, and the 5 C's I think help us get there, and I think also probably help us create a filter so that we know when we're being buttered up, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We've spent 3 sessions on grateful leadership. Before we wrap on this one, Susan, has this always been part of your practice, or is this something that you've discovered? How did that happen?
That's a great question. So I joined the Center for Grateful Leadership. It's a free group. You can look up, I think it's gratefulleadership.com will get you to their page. And they have monthly sessions. And I joined them as a kind of an interest. I was like, oh, it's grateful leadership. That sounds like a positive thing. And I actually did a presentation to them on servant leadership because I know servant leadership well. I teach it. Not only do I use it for agile approach to project management, but I use it even in the traditional approach to project management. And when I saw how well it worked with servant leadership, I said, let's do a presentation on that. So I presented on servant leadership to a group of people knowing grateful leadership. And then I thought to myself, well, gosh, we use servant leadership for agile. Why couldn't we use grateful leadership? And it kind of came out of a conversation. I actually did a podcast with a gentleman, Jim Trella, who does podcasts for grateful leadership with different experts every day, actually. Or no, every week. Sorry. Every week on Monday, he does a podcast. And so in a conversation with him, we started talking about how you could use grateful leadership for agile, because he does a little bit of agile. I do a lot of agile. And it just kind of came out of that. And I thought to myself, well, there's this thing of a grateful agile leader. And so I wrote an article about that. I shared it with some different professionals, and it's been posted as a blog. And now actually I'm in a conversation with the author of the book, Grateful Leadership, Judy Umlas. And we are actually trying to get people in the industry and that focused on Scrum and standard organizations to adopt grateful leadership along with servant leadership as part of training for people who want to learn more about Agile and Scrum. And why not give them another tool? So that's kind of where the inception of it came. And, I think it's interesting. I feel that innovation lies where two different industries overlap. So when we think about grateful leadership, certainly servant leadership, all those leadership styles, we're really talking about, psychology and human resource management. And then we look at Agile. Agile is a way to approach IT projects, but also other types of projects and project management. And when you mix those two together, that's really a place for innovation, because it's not something people have maybe done before or thought about before. And I think that there's some really powerful things that come out of that when you marry different industries and the best of those industries and you combine them together. That actually create something new. And so I've been sort of fortunate to be put in a place where I'm coming with this Agile mindset to a forum where people are talking about leadership. And I'm like, well, wow, that's great. Let's do that with Agile. And that isn't something that anybody else thought of because they weren't coming to that with the Agile mindset as an Agile professional and an Agile teacher. So that's just kind of how it happened.
Susan Parente, how would people continue the conversation?
Oh, you can reach out to me. You can email me, Parente at S as in Sam, the number 3 -tec.com. So s3tech.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn as Susan Parente.
Susan, as always, this is absolutely extraordinary. Thank you for bringing your Not a Scrumdamentalist column to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Our stories aren't getting done. Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. One of the topics suggested by the audience was addressing the problem of stories not completing during a sprint. The majority of the audience were using Scrum or Scrum-Bon approaches to developing and maintaining software. Attendees provided several situations to add context to their topic request. Boiling down the stories they provided yields 3 usual suspects that are the bane of teams everywhere. 1. Teams taking on more work than they can complete in a specific time box. Teams commit to more work than they can complete for many reasons, including stakeholders pushing work into the team during planning, a yes culture, and acting without planning or refinement. 2. Teams not having control of their work entry process after a sprint starts. Work entry is a common problem that includes porous boundaries, yes culture issues, and hybrid development and maintenance teams. 3. Work hitting roadblocks before being shippable. This category includes issues such as black swans, unpredictable situations. Those are really, really rare. And predictable situations that are not considered. Self-inflicted roadblocks are generally failures to understand the workflow, leadership, or planning problems. One of the solutions we discussed was to move to a continuous flow approach for working rather than sprint or an iteration-based approach. While I'm often a proponent of this sort of approach, it is not the solution to any of the 3 stuff doesn't get done when promised scenarios. Radically changing your approach, moving from a Scrum mindset to a Kanban mindset before addressing these 3 issues is tantamount to trying to grab a spoon out of a running garbage disposal. Scary, dangerous, and messy. A team that chronically does not complete its work items is a big problem. Teams in this situation will develop strained relationships with stakeholders and are not trusted to deliver. Knee-jerk reactions almost never address the root cause of the problem and postpone the reckoning that always happens. Many coaches refer to taking the easy way out as not adopting an agile mindset. I would rather call it a slow-motion train wreck leading to failure of Agile and a waste of time and money. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com and go to the blog and read the 3 entries on those 3 specific scenarios that are the usual suspects. In Reread Saturday News, Chapter 20 of Tame, Your Workflow is titled Operational Governance in PEST Environments. Daniel Doiron describes this chapter as an ode to management by exception. There are 2 threads in this chapter that I highlight. The first is Steve and Daniel's discussion on the need for different perspectives to identify the constraint in complicated environments. The second major component in the chapter is the discussion of an approach for governance. I'm quoted at the end of this chapter giving this book my highest praise. This book is very useful. The Software Process and Measurement Cast is a proud media sponsor of the Live at Manning Conference, Math for Data Science, to be held December 1st, 2020, 12 o'clock to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live on Twitch. Link in the show notes. Register for free for a unique chance to learn from statisticians and math masters. Link in the show notes. The next Software Process and Measurement Cast number 625 will feature our interview with Drew Angle. Drew and I talk about web development and software development excellence. Being good is more than just excellence in coding. Listening and problem solving are also needed. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?